over you? We're just about to start the class. I was facing some connectivity issue here. So I'm just sending the message to the other students so that they can also join in the class. Just 1 second. Yeah, I was facing a technical issue, but now we can start the class. Should I start it with you being all alone over here and let other students join in because we are already late for the class? Okay. So today the last area of capital budgeting that I want to discuss with you is the risk management area in capital budgeting. Basically, in capital budgeting we discussed about that it is an investment decision. And we discussed about various techniques of capital budgeting. We discussed about the NPV method. We discussed about IRR method. We discussed about the profitability index method. We also discussed about the payback period method. Now today, and while doing all these methods, what we did, we estimated the cash flows, right? While doing all these methods, while following all these methods, we were estimating the cash flows. So when we are estimating something, don't you think that we are taking a kind of a risk? Because we are taking a call on future, right? And the future is unforeseen. So this capital budgeting decision that we are going to take, because it is going to give its fruits, because it is going to give its results in future, and the future is not very sure. So therefore these capital budgeting decisions are necessarily very risky decisions, isn't it? Whatever we are contemplating, whatever cash flows we are expecting, if we are able to get it, then the capital budgeting decision would be correct. But if we do not get the cash flows, then because there can be any risk, and the longer the period of the project, the more the risk, isn't it? Because we are estimating that this would be the cost, we are estimating this would be the revenue, but it may or may not hold true in future, right? So therefore we need to understand these capital budgeting decisions from the perspective of risk management, isn't it? It becomes very, very important that we look at it from the perspective of risk and then estimate what kind of risk can be there in this capital budgeting decision. So it has been, for some time a favorite question of the examiner, that risk and uncertainty is a part of capital budgeting decision, or what are the risks and uncertainties in the capital budgeting decision. So if this kind of a question comes in examination, you simply have to mention that because in the capital budgeting we are estimating cash flows with respect to futures and with respect to future, and the future costs, future revenues, future profits are very uncertain, so which cannot be foreseen in the current time. So therefore, definitely the capital budgeting decisions necessarily carry some part of risk, right? So now, how do we evaluate this risk? If there is risk, that does not mean that we're not going to go ahead, because we have studied in finance, higher the risk, higher the return, but at the same time, we have also been taught various techniques of risk evaluation and various techniques of risk management. So let us first try to find out as to what is the level of risk in a particular capital budgeting decision. Now before I go to that, let me just give you what is risk all about. What is this risk? In the last class I discussed with you the concept of standard deviation and mean. I hope the concept was clear in the last class. I discussed with you about standard deviation and mean. Was the concept clear to you? Okay. So now, when we talk about capital budgeting decisions, we are expecting some returns. So we can say that this expected returns is equals to the mean. Right? This is the average that we expect. That okay, in the given market conditions, this is the average that industry is giving as a return. So we take an average return. Right? Now, if there is a standard deviation, as I discussed with you in the last class, I told you about the number of students in the class, and we had taken the height of the students, and we tried to find out that how much is the deviation. We also talked to you about two countries where in one country the income levels were 10 and 90, in another it was 50 and 60, I believe, 40 and 60, something like that. So we tried to find out the deviation. So the higher the deviation, the higher the risk. Now let me place these figures in a capital budgeting decision. Let us assume that in a capital budgeting decision, let us assume that in one project we are expecting cash flows which have which are in the range of say 50 to 60 rupees, and in another project we are expecting cash flows in the range of 10 to say 95. Now definitely the project which has got a range of 10 to 95 is more risky, isn't it? So as we use the concept of standard deviation in statistics, similarly we can use the concept of standard deviation in capital budgeting also to understand the level of risk. What is risk? Risk is deviation from the expected returns. What is risk? Risk is deviation from the expected return. I welcome Sindhura and Dipali to the class. I just was discussing about the risk in the capital budgeting decision, and we've just started because there was a very poor connectivity at my end. So we were talking about the risk. We were saying that because in capital budgeting decisions, what we do, we estimate the future cash flows and then we discount it to the present value. Now whatever we are estimating for future, it may or may not come true. Right? It may or may not come true. So if there are any chances that whatever we are expecting will not come true, that means the decision has got some element of risk, isn't it? So how do we measure this risk? That was the question that I was trying to answer. Because this is something which is very important. So because we have been told higher the risk, higher the return that we should expect. So in a particular capital budgeting decision where the level of risk is going to be higher, we should expect a higher return, isn't it? So one of the measures of risk is standard deviation. We've discussed this technique in the last class. We said that standard deviation is a statistical technique used in capital budgeting decisions to determine the variation or deviation from the mean of cash flows of the project. That means that okay, we were expecting a particular level of cash flows. So if the cash flows can deviate from that particular level, that is the standard deviation. The project with lesser standard deviation in cash flows carries lesser risk and uncertainty. Lower the standard deviation, the better it is for the project, right? And how do we measure standard deviation? We have said that standard deviation is measured as x, if we have got the probability, then we write probability multiplied by x minus x bar square, and we take a square root of that to find out standard deviation. Probability multiplied by x minus x bar square is equals to variance, and the square root of variance is standard deviation. Now, when we talk about standard deviation, as I discussed with you in the last class, where we found that in one project the standard deviation was 45, in another project it was 10, right? Now, we said that the project which has got 45 standard deviation is more risky. But then, giving this a kind of a decision would not be correct, because we need to find the standard deviation as a percentage of mean. Because otherwise comparing two different projects would be, we would not be able to rank them. So the technique where we try to find out the percentage of standard deviation to mean is called coefficient of variation. Because if we have to compare alternative projects and we want to compare the uncertainty in two alternative projects, if they are different in size, then what we need an information on the coefficient of variation, which is a percentage of standard deviation to mean, right? So one, we found standard deviation, The second, we rated the different projects with respect to the risk levels by finding out the coefficient of variation. Fine with us? Is the two methods clear? Two techniques, are they clear to everybody? The coefficient again. See, I'm saying that in the last class I told you, when we tried to calculate standard deviation, in one case, in the first case, the standard deviation was coming as 45, and in the second case it was coming as 10. Right? In the first case the mean was 50, and in the second case also the mean was 50. So if we are able to find out the percentage of standard deviation to mean, we can say that it is 90% standard deviation in case of in A case, and it is 20% standard deviation in B case, right? So if we are able to find out percentages, we would be able to say, because right now the two projects are having the same level of mean, but it may happen that in one case the mean is say 60 or maybe 90, and in the second case the mean may be 30. So in that situation, the ranking of the projects might get difficult. So in order to find out the ranking, what we should do, we should write standard deviation divided by mean multiplied by 100. It's just to find out the percentage of standard deviation vis-a-vis the mean, right? So the third is the risk adjusted discount rates. Now what do I mean to say by that? See, risk adjusted discount rates means that supposing we are contemplating a higher level of risk in a particular project, right? Because it has got a higher standard deviation or it has got a higher coefficient of variation. So what we should do, we should discount that particular project's cash flows at a higher rate of return, right? When we do the discounting, what we should do, we should discount the cash flows of a project which is safer with a lower rate of discounting, and we should discount the cash flows of the project which is riskier with a higher rate of discounting. So that ways we would be able to get a lower net present value for a project which is more risky, and a higher net present value for a project which is less risky, and thereby we would be able to put the two projects together and then compare which gives you a higher net present value. Another is the certainty equivalent approach. In this particular approach, they divide the cash flows into two parts. Because if we are expecting that, okay, this particular project is going to give me a cash flows of rupees 10,000 per month or per year, in that situation, we can divide this into two parts. We can say that, okay, 5,000 is risk free. Now, 5,000 is certain and 5,000 may or may not come. Getting a return of 5,000 is certain, and the remaining 5,000 may or may not come. So in that situation, you will have to divide the cash flows into two parts. The risk, so then you have to discount the riskless cash flows at a risk-free rate and the risky cash flows at a risky rate, right? And that is how you can find out the certainty equivalent approach. So you can say that, okay, out of the total cash flows, what is the proportion of riskless cash flows to the risky cash flows? What is the proportion? So higher the certainty equivalent, the better it is for a particular project. Higher the certainty equivalent, the better it is for the project, because that is for sure that this much percentage we are going to receive for sure, and the remaining may or may not come. I would be giving you some of the examples of these techniques also. So if in the beginning you're finding it a little too theoretical, don't worry about that. I'm giving you theory, and then I would be moving to some practical questions also here. The next is a decision tree technique. Now in the decision tree technique, what we try to understand is that, okay, if we take a capital budgeting decision, there can be maybe two alternatives. One is we go ahead with the project, second is we do not go ahead with the project. Now if we decide to go ahead with the project, in that situation, the project may give this much of cash flow, or it may give a lesser, or it may not give any cash flows, right? So we have got various variants coming from a particular decision. If it gives the cash flow, then we would be reinvesting that cash flow in business. So again, we can talk about some return on those cash flows as well. So that is called a decision tree technique, and we would be doing a practical question on this as well. The next is a sensitivity analysis, which I discussed with you in the last class, where we had tried to find out the net present value, and then we tried to understand that if the selling price increases by if the selling price decreases by 5%, what is going to be the impact on net present value? Or if the cost price increases by 10%, what is going to be the impact on the net present value? I hope you remember that particular question. So there I discussed with you. So here what we try to understand, the variables where there can be some kind of a variability. There can be some variables which may change, and then we have to understand the possibility of change in these variables, and then try and find out the impact of change in these variables on the net present value of the project, right? And this we can do it with different variables, and we can do some variables at one go as well. And then we have to compare the original rate of return with the degree of sensitivity that we did. We said, there's going to be an impact to an extent of 76% on the cash flows, where we try to understand the degree of sensitivity. I hope you remember that if the selling price changes by 10%, the net present value gets reduced by 76%, right? So that is how we had done in the last class, and based upon the sensitivity analysis, then you can do a subjective evaluation of whether you want to actually go ahead with the project or not. The next technique for risk evaluation is simulation technique. In simulation, which I would be doing with the help of a particular example, a simple example with you, here we try to construct a mathematical model and try to make a what if analysis, assuming that we are not able to identify the variables which may change, but future is uncertain, and we want to check as to if certain things change, what will happen. So in order to do that, we have to do simulation, which I would be discussing with you. And the last is linear programming. Linear programming is also called a constraint analysis, where we mention the constraints. This is most helpful in capital rationing, where we try to put in the constraints that, okay, this is my limited budget and these are my constraints, and in the given and I try to formulate an objective function where I try to maximize my net present value within the given constraints, and try to solve the problem with the help of linear programming technique. So in the June examination, because as I said, this has over a period of time started becoming a favorite topic of the examiner. So there was a question in the examination in June 15, explain the concept of sensitivity analysis. What is sensitivity analysis? Explain that, right? So you have to mention that in sensitivity analysis, we have to find out the various variables and try to find out how sensitive they are, how sensitive is the change in these variables on the net present value, right? So because it will give the management a better information about the possible outcomes that can occur, and in that, if we know that what could be the possible outcomes, then we can use our judgment and experience to accept or reject a particular project, right? So here we try to place certain assumptions and try to see that if the assumptions change, then what is going to be the impact on the investment, right? So therefore sensitivity analysis helps a lot, and you can do sensitivity analysis on a computer as well, and it helps you in estimating the returns, by changing the various variables, and then you can find out whether the project should be acceptable or not. So before we go further, let me do 2-3 review questions with you, whether a question from this part are of theory or more of practical. Well, up to 1 year back, the questions coming from this part were purely theoretical in nature. But from the last 1 year, we have seen that at times they're asking questions, which are practical also. So I'll be doing some of the practical questions with you so that you have a fair idea as to how do we use these techniques. They're not very difficult, just have some patience and we would be able to understand them. The question is, Surya Manufacturers is planning to start a new manufacturing process. I'll be just giving you the concept of standard deviation and coefficient of variation over here. Right? So Surya Manufacturer is planning to start a new manufacturing process. following are the estimated net cash flows and probabilities of the new manufacturing process. They are planning a new manufacturing process, and if they start with this new manufacturing process, they will have to invest rupees 2 lakhs, which is your cash outflow at year 0, right? Now there are 20% chances that in the next 5 years the cash inflows would be 40,000 rupees per annum. There are 60% chances that the cash inflows would be 60,000 rupees per annum, and if this will happen, then you will also have a salvage value of rupees 40,000, and there are again 20% chances that the cash flows would be rupees 80,000 per annum, and if that would happen, you can also get a salvage value of rupees 60,000, right? Surya Manufacturers' cost of capital for an average risk project is 10%. So the situation is clear. We are deciding to invest rupees 2 lakhs. This 2 lakhs can give you 40,000 or 60,000 or 80,000, any returns. The probability of these three returns is 20%, 60% and 20% respectively. That completely depends upon the market conditions, right? So the situation is clear. Is the situation clear to everybody? Okay. So now we go to the questions. We have to find out the best case and the worst case here. So what we should do whenever we have been given a question of this kind, as we did in the last class, so what we did was we multiplied the cash flows with the probabilities to find out the expected cash flows, right? We multiplied the cash flows with probabilities to find out the expected cash flows. So in year 0, 2 lakhs multiplied by 20% was 40,000 rupees. In year 0, for 60% probability, 2 lakhs was multiplied with 60%. And for the third situation, the same 2 lakh was multiplied with 20%. So then we added the three together. So in year 0, whatever be the probabilities, the amount which has to be invested is rupees 2 lakhs. Now year 1, we have been told that there are 20% chances that you can get 40% return. Then there are 60% chances that you can get 60,000 return, and then there are 20% chances that you can get 80,000 return. So we have multiplied the probabilities with the cash flows and then added the three together. So we realize that in the 5 years, the expected cash flow is coming as 60,000 rupees. We've also been told that in case of 60%, there's 60% probability that you would be getting a salvage value of rupees 40,000, and there is 20% chance that you can get a salvage value of rupees 60,000. So we multiplied the salvage value also with the probabilities. So the salvage value which is expected is 36,000 rupees. Now we've got the expected cash flows. What we should do, we should discount them to the present value to find out the net present value, right? So what we did, we mentioned the cash flows over here, and because this was at year 0, so there's no need for any discounting. In year 1, we divided it with 1.1 because 10% is the discounting rate. In year 2, we divided it with 1.1 raised to power 2, and so on and so forth. So having discounted all of them for 5 years, we have then reduced the cash outflows from the total of cash inflows, and we found that the net present value is coming as 49,800 rupees. Now because the net present value is positive, so we would decide to go ahead with the project as a base case scenario, like on an average we should go ahead with the project. Now we have been told that we have to find out the NPV of the worst case and the NPV of the best case as well. So in order to find out NPV of worst case, what we will do, the worst case scenario is 40,000 rupees per annum. Initial investment is rupees 2 lakhs and no salvage value, right? So we simply discount it at 10% and find out that if the worst case is going to be there, then there's going to be a negative net present value of 48,369, right? So in the worst situation, there's going to be a loss in the net present value of 48,369. And if I take the base case scenario, then in that situation we are going to get 60,000 rupees every year, and we are going to get a salvage value of rupees 40,000. So discounting all of them, we are getting a net present value of 52,284, which has got a 60% probability. And then we have got the best case where the cash flows would be 80,000 rupees and a salvage value of 60,000 rupees, and we discount them and we find that there is a net present value of 1,40,518, right? So we have found out the net present value in the worst case, we have found out the net present value in the base case, and we have found out the net present value in the best case also. We can multiply them with their probabilities and find out that here we can find out that the net present value, the most expected after multiplying with their probabilities, the net present value is coming as 49,800 rupees. Now the question goes further actually. The probability of occurrence of the worst case if the cash flows are perfectly dependent over time and if they are independent over time. Now just try to understand this particular question. I hope the best case, worst case and base case NPVs were clear to everybody. See, the thing is that we were told that in the worst situation you would be getting 40,000 rupees for 5 years. So we discounted this 40,000 rupees with the present value annuity factor at the rate of 10% for 5 years, right? And whatever came the amount from that, we reduced 2 lakh rupees, which was my initial cash flow, and I realized that the net present value is negative. Similarly, for the best case, we multiplied it 80,000 rupees because in that situation we were getting 80,000 rupees and we were also getting a salvage value of rupees 60,000. We tried to discount it to the present value, and then from that we reduced the net present the cash outflow of rupees 2 lakhs and found out that the net present value was quite positive. Ganesh, is it getting clear? Now we go further because here comes the catch of the question. What is the probability of occurrence of the worst case if the cash flows are perfectly dependent over time and if they are perfectly independent over time? Now just try to understand this situation. See, when we say the cash flows are perfectly dependent over time, that means that if in year 1 you had the worst case, then what is the probability that there will be worst case in all the 5 years? Because when we are talking about a project, it may happen that in the first year you had got the worst case, then in the second year you had got the best case, and in the third year you had got the most likely situation, right? But the question comes that what is the probability that if you had got the worst case scenario in the first year, you will have the worst case in all the 5 years? That means the cash flows are perfectly positively correlated with each other, right? So the probability is very low. What is the probability? It is 20% multiplied by 20% multiplied by 20%, right? Am I not clearly audible? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Basically because it's raining outside, maybe that is the reason. Okay, so what I'm saying is that we are trying to understand as to what is the probability of having the worst case scenario year by year, right? So that means 20% multiplied by 20% multiplied by 20% multiplied by 20%. If we do it 5 times, that is the probability that the worst case scenario will remain every year. You're getting my point? You're getting my point? So it says that if the cash flows are perfectly dependent, then the low cash flows in the first year will mean a low cash flow in every year. Thus, the probability of the worst case occurring is the probability of getting 40,000 net cash flows in every year, right? It means 40,000 cash flows in every year. So the probability of that can be calculated as 20% multiplied by 20%, that is equals to 0.032%. 0.032%. So I hope you're able to understand what we are trying to say and what the point getting clear? Is the point getting clear? See, because we are saying the cash flows are perfectly positively correlated. So we are multiplying it again and again because we are saying that what is the chance that every year we are going to have a worst case. So the chance is very low, isn't it? Every year if you are going to have a worst case, then it is the situation is 20%, 20%, 20%, 20% of 20% chances, then 20% of the 0.04% of 4% chances, and so on and so forth. So therefore there is 0.032% chance that this is going to happen, that every year we are going to have the worst case, right? But and if the cash flows are independent over time. Now if the cash flows are independent over time, what does it mean? It means that okay, in the supposing you started with the project, in the first year supposing you had the cash flow of 40,000, in the next year you will have the cash flow of say 60,000, then in the next year you can have cash flows of 80,000, then again you can have it for 60,000, and then again you can have the cash flow of 40,000 rupees. The question was that what is the probability of this kind of a cash flow? You getting my point? And what would be the question is, and if they're independent over time. So if they're independent over time, then these kinds of cash flows will come. Are you able to follow what I'm trying to say? So in case of these kinds of cash flows which are independent of each other, that means that they are not symmetric. That means that they're not symmetric. In that situation, there is 20% probability of worst case, there is 60% probability of base case, and there is 20% probability of best case. So we write down the net present value in all the three situations and multiply the cash flow, the net present values with the probabilities, and try to find out the expected cash flows. So if the cash flows are going to be perfectly independent of each other, then we can expect a positive net present value of 49,800 rupees. Then we can expect a positive net present value of, okay. Now you would say that, ma'am, you were talking about standard deviation, and here you're just trying to find out the expected cash flows or the expected net present value. So now let us understand that if we have to find out the standard deviation and the coefficient of, variation, then how do we go ahead with this? Now in the given situation, if you have to find out the standard deviation, and calculating the standard deviation is x minus probability multiplied by x minus x bar square. Now here x bar is 49,800 because this is my expected net present value. Now there are 20% chances that there is going to be a minus 48,368 as a net present value. Minus 48,368 minus 49,800 square, plus 60% chances that the net present value would be 52,284 minus X bar, which is 49,800, plus 20% chances that the net present value would be 1,40,518, minus again the expected net present value of 49,800 ka square. This gives you the figure of 3,577,044,503. In order to find out the standard deviation, what we have to do, we have to take the square root of this number. So the standard deviation is coming as 59,808. In this particular project, we are expecting a net present value of 49,800, but there can be a deviation up to 59,808 rupees on the higher side, and then there can be a deviation of 59,808 rupees on the lower side as well. There can be a deviation of 59,808 on the higher side, and then there can be a deviation of 59,808 on the lower side as well. So in order to find out coefficient of variation, what we do, we divide the standard deviation with the mean. So mean is 49,800, standard deviation is 59,808. For 59,808 divided by 49,800 is equals to 1.2, or there are the coefficient of variation in this particular case is 120%. If we multiply it with 100, we will in this particular situation. You're getting my point? So basically these are the statistical techniques that we have used. We said that though we are expecting a cash flow in this particular project, we are expecting a net present value in this particular project of 49,800 rupees, but it can deviate by 59,000 rupees. So when it deviates, then you can even have a loss, right? You can even have a loss. But the chance of getting the worst case year by year. Now what does that mean? That if the cash in this particular situation, I am expecting 49,800 rupees as a positive net present value. And the standard deviation was 59,000. What was it? 808. Now you would tell me that, ma'am, you were saying that the project can deviate on the positive side or it can deviate on the negative side by 59,808. If this project deviates on the negative side by 59,808, then I'm going to have a negative net present value of 10,000 something, right? 10,008 rupees. You're getting my point? 59,808 minus 49,800. You're following? Can I get some responses, please? Am I audible? Okay. So I hope the point is getting clear. I told you that the net present value is 49,800 rupees and the standard deviation is 59,808. That means that if there would be a loss, then the loss would be of 10,008 rupees, right? But when we saw the worst case scenario, the loss was coming around 40,000 something. It was coming as 48,368. Now this 48,368 rupees of loss would happen when the cash flows would be of rupees 40,000 year by year. You're getting my point? But that situation would ideally not prevail. That because there are just 20% chances that this will happen. You're getting my point? You're able to follow what I'm trying to say. In general, the situation will not remain same. So therefore, the standard deviation has been taken as 59,808, and the expected net present value is 49,800 rupees, which is a positive net present value. And therefore, in this particular case, we can go ahead with the project if we are ready to take a loss of 10,008 rupees, right? If we have the capacity to bear a loss of 10,008 rupees, then we should go ahead with this kind of a project. Otherwise, we should look for another project and try to find out where the standard deviation is lower than this. I hope the point is getting clear. I hope I'm not confusing you. Any questions, Dipali? If the concept of standard deviation is clear, then we move to the next concept, which is simulation. Now I'm moving to the next concept, which is simulation. Now in simulation, we've already done the scenario and the sensitivity analysis. So I'm straight away, sensitivity analysis we did in the last class. So I'm straight away moving to simulation. Now in this situation, again the audio problem is coming, because from my side now the connectivity is perfect. It is excellent. Now it's okay. Okay. So as I was saying that I am now moving to simulation. This was asked in December 2015 examination in the old syllabus. You are the CFO of Desire Limited. Your company proposes to buy equipment costing rupees 1 lakh. The equipment will last for 5 years. The cost of capital to the company is 10%. Your analyst has suggested the expected revenues, cost and corresponding probabilities as under. So the analyst says that when you invest in this equipment, which is costing rupees 1 lakh, there is a probability of 15% that you would be getting a revenue of rupees 1 lakh, and there is a probability of 10% that the cost would be 62,500. Then we've got another situation. There is a 40% probability that the revenue would be 1,25,000, and there is 25% probability that the cost would be 75,000, and there is 30% probability that the revenue would be 1,37,500 and the cost would be 87,500, and then there is a 15% probability that the revenue would be 1,50,000, and there is a 30% probability that the cost would be 1 lakh. Now if I read these numbers, I am not able to make heads and tails out of it, because it becomes very difficult. Either we just multiply the probabilities with the revenues, with the expected revenues, and we multiply the probabilities of cost with the expected cost to find out the expected revenue and the expected cost. But then it may not hold true. Because you know, it depends upon situations. The situation may be that where we have the revenues of rupees 1 lakh and we've got the cost also of rupees 1 lakh. So we can have a 15% probability on the revenue side, and we can have a 30% probability on the cost side, and then how are we going to handle the situation? So therefore, we do not know what will happen in future. So let us do some simulation. Simulation is that let us do some random analysis. Let us pick something from here, something from there, and try to find out whether it is positive or not, right? So this is simulation based upon random numbers. So they said that now that you are a CFO, so you want to run a simulation model, and you have picked up the random numbers 81, 2, 60, 4, 46, 31, 67 and 25. These are random numbers that you can pick by making chits from 0 to 100 and pick up any number out of that, right? These are randomly picked numbers. They have been picked alternatively for revenues and costs. So the first number is for revenue, and the second number is for cost, and then the third number is for revenue, and the fourth number is for cost, right? Decide whether the project can be undertaken by the company. Based upon the numbers that has been given to us, we have to find out whether the project can be taken up by the company or not. The situation is clear. These are like, you in a bowl you place numbers from 1 to 100, and then out of that you pick up some random numbers, right? We've been told that they've picked up random numbers. So from that particular bowl you've picked up these random numbers, and you're trying, because they're simply probabilities, so we just want to check that, okay, in a random situation, whether it is going to give me a positive or a negative net present value. Fine. So the question is understandable. Okay. So what we do, no, there is no base. These are random numbers. There is no base to choose these numbers. But they have to be from 1 to 100, or you can say they can be from 0 to 100. Okay. So what we do, we've written down first the revenue side and the probabilities, and then we have written the cumulative probability. So there is, because if the revenue is going to be 1,25,000, we've written the revenue on in an increasing fashion. So if the revenue is going to be 1 lakh rupees, there's a 15% probability, and revenue is going to be 1,25,000, there's a 40% probability. But if the revenue is going to be 1,25,000, then definitely it is going to be more than rupees 1 lakh. So there is a cumulative probability of 55% that the revenue would be between 0 to 1,25,000. Right? Right? Then if the revenue is going to be 1,37,500, it is definitely going to be more than rupees 1 lakh and 125. Anybody else who's facing technical issues here? Okay. So what I'm saying here, Ganesh, is that if the revenue is going to increase, definitely we can find out the cumulative probabilities, right? So we have added the probabilities as the revenue is increasing, right? So we've calculated here the cumulative probabilities, and then we have made random number intervals of these probabilities based upon cumulative probabilities. So 0 to 15, 0 to 15% is in the interval of 0 to 14. Then 55% is in the interval of 15 to 54. Then 85% is in the interval of 55 to 84, and then 100% is in the intervals of 85 to 99. So you've got we've framed some random number intervals for revenue side. Similarly, we can make these random number intervals for the cost side as well. Okay. Now let us come to the random numbers of the revenue side, which we had picked up from the bowl, and the random numbers on the cost side, which we had picked up from the bowl. This was given to us in the question. Now assuming the random number is 81. So random number 81 is falling in this 1,37,500 revenue. So that means that for this random number, the revenue would be 1,37,500. Because these are where, we do not have any relationships, right? Then for 60 number, it will fall between 55 to 84, again 1,37,500. 46 number will fall between 15 and 54, and we are going to have a revenue 1,25,000. And then 67 again is fall under 5,37,000. We are going to simply find out an average of them, and the average is coming as 1,34,375. Similarly, on the cost side, we will check with the range with the random numbers. So, and we place them here. And so for random number 2, the cost is coming as 62,500. For random number 4, the cost is coming as 62,500. For random number 31, the cost is coming as 75,000. Random number 25 also the cost is coming as 75,000. So we try to find out the average of the random of the cost in the 4 alternatives, which is coming as 68,750. Now what we do, so on the basis of this we decide the annual cash flows. So the cash flows would be 134,375, which is going to be the revenue, minus cost 68,750. So the cash flow would be 65,625. You had to invest rupees 1 lakh in this equipment, and you can get 65,625 in year 1 to 5. Multiply it with the present value factor of annuity and find out the net present value of 1,48,784. Right? And because the net present value is positive, so the project is viable. Got the point? Yep. So these are various ways in which we look at the risk part. Coming to one last technique, which is decision tree method. Now on decision tree, it's not a very difficult method. Here I'm taking simply an example. L&R Limited wishes to develop new virus cleaner software. The cost of pilot project would be rupees 2,40,000. Presently, the chances of the product being successfully launched on a commercial scale are rated at 50%. There are 50% chances that we would be able to commercially launch this particular product. And so what we are trying to make is a new virus cleaner software. And the cost of the pilot project is 2,40,000. In case the project does not succeed, because we're talking about decision tree, the tree will always have branches. One branch says that it would be successful, the chances are 50%. Remaining 50% says that it would not be successful. If it is successful, then L&R can invest a sum of rupees 20 lakhs to market the product. Right? Because if my pilot project would be successful, then I will have to market it, and because if I have to commercially launch it, so when I decide to market it, I will have to invest an amount of rupees 20 lakhs. Such an effort can generate perpetually an annual net after tax cash income of rupees 4 lakhs. So if we launch the project, it will give us rupees 4 lakhs per annum. Even if the commercial launch fails. Now again going to the next step. One is that the pilot project was successful, so we commercially launched it, and when we commercially launched it, the commercial launch was successful, and we got a perpetual net income, a net cash flows of rupees 4 lakhs. But it may happen that though the project at the pilot project stage was successful, but at the commercial launch level it may become it may fail. So in that situation, they will make an investment of rupees 12 lakhs with the hope of gaining perpetually a sum of rupees 1 lakh. Evaluate the proposal adopting decision tree approach. The discount rate is 10%. Now let me explain it with the help of a decision tree what we are trying to say. We are saying that if we do a test, we will have to spend rupees 2,40,000. Otherwise, we do not do a test, so we do not spend any money. There are 50% chances that the test would be successful. There are 50% chances that the test would be unsuccessful. If the test would be unsuccessful, in that situation, we will invest 12 lakh rupees and we will earn 1 lakh rupees of income in perpetuity. But if the project is going to be successful, we will invest rupees 20 lakhs and we will earn an income of 4 lakhs in perpetuity. In both the cases, we will have an option of not to invest over here, right? Whether the test is successful or the test is a failure, in both the cases, we will always have an option not to invest. Now, supposing we are at point C, and we have to choose between investing rupees 20 lakhs for a perpetual benefit of 4 lakhs or not to invest. Now, we are starting from the last leg of the decision tree. We are asking that in case we can get 4 lakh rupees in perpetuity, will it be advisable to invest rupees 20 lakhs? And when the discounting rate is 10%. So in case of perpetuity, there is a typical formula which I'm not sharing with you right now over here. I'm just giving you the number. So if you do the discounting, it is giving you a net benefit of rupees 20 lakhs. That means that if 4 lakh rupees discounted at 10% for perpetuity will give you rupees 40 lakhs, and the initial cost was 20 lakh rupees. So there you're going to have a net benefit of 20 lakh rupees. But if the test was unsuccessful, then you have to choose whether you want to invest 12 lakh rupees to get 1 lakh in perpetuity or not. So if you do that, in that situation, the capitalized value of benefit is coming as 10 lakh rupees. In this situation, you are investing 12 lakh rupees and you're getting 10 lakh rupees. There's a negative benefit of rupees 2 lakhs. So it is advisable that if the project is a failure, then we will not invest in this particular project. If the test is a failure, then we have to say that we will not invest. But if the project, because this decision now at point number C and point number D, we are very clear that if the project is success, we will invest 20 lakh rupees and we will earn rupees 4 lakhs in perpetuity. But if a project is a failure, then we will decide not to invest. Is this point clear? Is this point getting clear? Okay. Now the question comes, should we invest this 2,40,000? Right? We have to now come to point number B. We are decided for C and D now. Now, if the project is going to be successful, in that situation, we will be investing rupees 20 lakhs. We would be investing rupees 20, no, we would be having a net gain of rupees 20 lakhs, sorry. If the project is going to be successful, in that situation, we are going to have a net gain of rupees 20 lakhs, and the probability of getting that gain is 50%. So multiply the amount with probability, so you get a net result of rupees 10 lakhs. Right? So the expected market value at B is 10 lakh rupees. And what are you investing to get that 10 lakh rupees? You are investing 2,40,000 rupees. Because there is a 50% probability of earning rupees 10 lakhs, so it is advisable to take that risk. There is a 50% probability of getting a net present value of rupees 20 lakhs. And for that, you are investing 2,40,000 rupees today. So if I multiply the net present value with the probability, I am getting a return of 10 lakh rupees. For that, I have to invest 2,40,000 rupees today. It is advisable to invest it, isn't it? So this is how we work in the decision tree approach. We go to the final alternative and try to see as to how and which particular decision we would like to follow, and what is the probability of doing that. You're able to follow? Are you able to understand what is decision tree approach? Great. So these were some of the approaches. The last one which I wanted to discuss with you is the linear programming technique. I would not be discussing a practical question over here because though we have been discussing in some of the earlier sessions, but it has never been asked in the question as a question in examination. The reason for this is that for linear programming you generally require a computer. So that is why perhaps they're not asking it in the examination. So I would not like to take a lot of your time over here for doing linear programming technique. But I'll just tell you theoretically what is linear programming all about. See, linear programming is a mathematical technique where we try to make an objective function. What is my objective? My objective in case of a capital budgeting decision is to maximize the net present value. In a capital budgeting decision, my objective is to maximize the net present value. Assuming I've got 3 alternative investment proposals in hand, and I've got rupees 50 lakhs to invest. Now I have to decide that this 50 lakh rupees should be invested in which 2 projects or which one project, so that it maximizes my net present value, right? So in linear programming, we make the objective function, then we make the constraints. The constraints are that the maximum amount to be invested is rupees 50 lakhs. This is my constraint. There can be the second constraint that I want that my cost of capital is 10%. So my IRR has to be more than 10% in all situations. Then only I would be like to. So these are my constraints. Now, having decided my constraints and my objective function, I try to find out the all feasible options, because there might be A and B which might be giving me a positive net present value. A and C might be giving me a positive net present value. B and C might be giving me a positive net present value. Then these are the feasible solutions. Out of the feasible solutions, then I try to find out the optimal, that is the best solution to the problem, that which are the 2 projects in which I should invest so that I get the positive net present value. So this linear programming technique is frequently used in capital budgeting for investment allocation processes, where you have got limited funds and you've got multiple investment opportunities. So in that situation, linear programming is considered to be the best programming technique, right? So this was all about the risk in the capital budgeting decision. Any questions coming from your side? Anything that you want to ask? Any doubts, any queries, any questions? So with this, we are finishing off with capital budgeting, your second chapter of study material. I want you to be now prepared with this, because the complete technique I'm going to discuss with you, I'm going to ask you in this week's exam preparatory. Only topic for this week's exam preparatory is capital budgeting. So up to risk management, you have to completely prepare yourself. And for that, I want you to, not only do now your study material, but also the practice manual, and also the reference books, Khan and Jain and I am Pandey. Please do that, and in case you've got any queries, you can definitely come back to me. So nothing, not many queries are here as of now, because the topic was completely new. You need to develop your conceptual understanding. Yeah, risk analysis is also a part of this week's exam preparatory. So you have to prepare yourself well, right? So with this, I think we would like to close for today. I've given you a very different platform today. So it might have gone a little heavier for today. It was too mathematical in nature. It will take some time and some level of practice to be familiar with these concepts. You have to revise, you have to remember and practice. So for now, it is in your domain. Do it well. All the best to all of you. Thank you so very much.